Good evening, everybody. It's been a little while since I was able to do a live stream, and I've missed you all dearly. So here we are. Um, as I mentioned on the live Instagram, I have been crazy busy mixing and just family stuff and all that other great stuff that we all try to kind of keep a balanced lifestyle, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to be as active on the live streams as I would like to be. I'm first and foremost a professional mixer and producer, not a full-time YouTuber like some of my colleagues. So I really appreciate everybody kind of being very patient and sticking with us, even though a couple of weeks or might even be about a month have gone by since I've been able to do a live stream. So anyways, here we are. Hopefully tonight's a good one. I've got a lot of questions to go through that have been emailed in, Instagram DMs, the Instagram story that I posted a couple days ago. Lots of cool stuff, as well as I've kind of got notes that I've been keeping some questions that people have asked me that I just haven't had time to get back to them. So give me a thumbs up on audio and video if somebody could. Please make sure we're good to go. Got the chat going here. I'm actually just going to go straight to the chat. I'll put the chat here. So good to go. Thanks, Jordan. Okay. Little bit of housekeeping right out of the gate here. Number one, in order to participate in the chat, you have to subscribe to the channel. I have really no idea how YouTube works, but I'm told that the more people who subscribe, the better it is for the algorithm, the bigger audience we get, the more incentive I have to do this more often, just because I know people are out there and care and want to hear me talk and go on long-winded explanations for 3 hours at a time. And so I appreciate hitting that subscribe button. Number two, if you're not signed up for my newsletter, go to my website, chrisbaseford.com, sign up there. As I mentioned a few minutes ago on Instagram, we are ramping up the content on the newsletter. It's same thing. Like we're trying to get this thing going, and the goal is to provide you guys with lots of valuable content, lots of free stuff, presets, templates, worksheets, exclusive little tips and tricks videos, little mini tutorials, that type of stuff that we're only going to put on there. Won't be going on YouTube, won't be going on Instagram and all that stuff. So please go to my website, sign up for that as well. And then when you also do that, you get a link to the Discord server. And that's also a community that we're trying to build and be a way for us all to interact together. Right now, with the live streams, it's obviously the chat, and then me sitting here, and not saying it's one way. Obviously, we're interacting here, but it's the Discord server is a really cool way for pretty much everybody to kind of interact and collaborate together. So you got to sign up to the newsletter to get the Discord server, all that fun stuff. Okay. I'm going to start off tonight with a question that has come up a couple times, and it actually was a little bit of the genesis of how this whole thing kind of came to be. This whole thing being, I'm hosting a production workshop at the Armory Studios in like 3 weeks. I've never let people come to the studio and actually like watch. Even friends, I've had like aspiring engineers from schools or people saying, "Hey, I'll just come and be a fly. If I could just be a fly on the wall." And it's like I've never really done it until now. So this is the first time I'm giving it a shot. It's basically we're going to be recording a band from top to bottom. We got 3 days. We're tracking drums, guitars, vocals, editing. We will basically be prepping for mix, and then I'm going to do the mix later. And I'm going to basically screen capture and video the whole mix process. All of the production stuff is also going to be documented as well. We're going to have a film crew there documenting the whole thing. And so There are a few spots left. We're keeping it a small group. I think it's five or six people, I believe, is going to be a small group. The Armory is one of my favorite studios in the world, which is why I wanted to do this there. I wanted to do my first. Well, hopefully there's more. I don't know if there's going to be more. I think there will be. Hopefully there will be. If people care and this goes well, I'll do more. But this might be the first and only. But I wanted to do it at a studio that I love. I wanted to do it at a studio would be exciting for people to go to. And so, anyways, if you are at all interested, and I hope that you are, you can head over to my website. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'll paste in the link here in the chat. How do we do this? Here we go. Dunk. All right. If you are watching, that will probably take you to more info. And like I said, I think there's 3 spots available left. We're going to be basically closing registration to this, I think, on the 10th of June. So you still got a little bit of time. It's in Vancouver. If you live in the area, it's probably pretty easy. If not, and you want a weekend away from the everyday whatever. You want a little mini vacation and educational at the same time, then come up to beautiful Vancouver. And yeah, so, all right. The reason why I started off with that was because I actually had a bunch of questions asking like, hey, I would love to see more content on your production process, or a lot of questions on that. And obviously I can get into that a little bit. And obviously I want to be able to answer as many questions as I can tonight and be able to give you as much in-depth information as possible. But personally, probably like the most impactful learning experiences for me were being in the studio with somebody. And it's some big names, and sometimes it was somebody that, maybe you've never heard of, or, hasn't done a bunch of huge records, but like you're in the studio and you're having those conversations, or you're trying things out, or you're just kind of seeing the things that maybe come naturally to the engineer or the producer, or maybe that's just like their instinct. So they don't know to actually articulate what they're doing, but you see them doing it and you're like, oh, that's what they do. I know sometimes when I'm trying to come up with various tips and tricks, some of the things that I feel like are the most valuable or the most educating or informative are the things that I don't even think anybody cares about, because it's just like every day for me. And it's such a, like, yeah, well, I do that 45 times a day. And it's like, yeah, that's just kind of what you do. Right. And so it's interesting when people see me doing things, or they're live in the studio with me and they're like, oh, look at that. And I'm like, oh yeah, people care about that. Like, oh, that's something that maybe isn't as obvious to other people, maybe as it is to me, or it's more obvious to them that they want to know it. So anyways, long-winded way of saying coming to the workshop is probably as good as it gets in terms of wanting to learn what my process is and see all the in-betweens. You're not going to see what the video editors wanted you to see. You're going to see everything, whether you like it or not. So would love to see you guys there. And like I said, I'm hoping this is the first of many, but for now, this is the only one on the calendar and the first one I've ever done. So would love to have you guys there. So, okay. I'm going to dig in, and I already see some questions coming in. Thank you. Appreciate that. I sent out a newsletter last week to all the subscribers in my community there, and I got some questions coming in through email. And because they subscribe and they participate in the community on the Discord server, they're going to get first cracks at the questions. So here we go. Let's dig in. So I'm going to try to mention who these are from, but if I don't, please forgive me. Or if you're watching and you want to say, hey, that was my question, feel free to jump in and I'll give you a shout out. So the first question, and this is from one of our community members, Kevin Shepard, asked, I'd be curious to know how you make your big ambient room samples. I'm interested in recording my own, but would appreciate knowing how you do it. Okay. So As some of you guys know, with Drum Forge, I collaborated with Drum Forge, and me and Andrew Cruz put together a sample pack. There's basically 4 different studios that rooms that we went and recorded. And it's kind of based off of a concept that I've been doing for a while, which is having very, I don't want to say like unrealistic ambient samples, but just having ambient samples that are so big and so crazy long and just bombastic that they're almost like, there would be no way you could actually record, you couldn't record a drum kit playing a part. Like you really can only sample them. So I think there's probably like maybe 3 key components to kind of recording these crazy room ambient samples. Number 1, most recording studios don't have a long enough like reverb time, and that's on purpose. That's not because they are not designed properly. You don't want that. You don't want 6 seconds or 10 seconds or 12 seconds of reverb time when you hit a snare drum. You don't want it lasting that long, because you're not just hitting one snare drum and letting it decay. When you're recording a band or you're recording a drum kit, you're recording a part, and then it just gets washy and it gets undefined, and it kind of sounds gross if the room is too kind of unwieldy. So I would say the first thing is look for a space that has a really long reverb time, or is super reflective, or has lots of hard surfaces that if a drum kit was being played in it, it would probably sound shitty. Like if there was somebody was playing a beat, it probably just sounds super washy and harsh and gross. But if you just hit the drum once and let it decay, it could sound really cool. So number 1 is the space is a big thing. So that's why we called it drum soap. Soap stands for sounds of ambient places. So we didn't care about being a recording studio. We didn't want a recording studio. We wanted to go to places that had these just massive ambients that were super long, and then we can sample them, and then you can kind of tailor them the way you want because they're samples, right? So number 1 is the place. Number 2 is figuring out what do you do with the microphone. So when I'm recording a drum kit, number 1, I love having room mics all over the place. And so and anybody who comes to the Armory will see that's a nice big drum room. I might have 4 to 6 different room mic options. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to use them all at any one time. That's not to say that I will use them all at all. Sometimes I'll just, I'll set them up and I'll record them, and I'll get them all. They'll all be kind of doing a different thing. And then depending on what the song needs, depending on the part, depending on the production, depending on the sound, then you pick and choose what you want. But having the options is cool. So the second thing I would say in regards to like ambient samples is make sure if you are going to go to some big, massive room and set up a drum kit and take your recording rig and do all that stuff, make sure you get more mic options than you need. And not just actual which mics you use, but actually the positioning. So when we did Soap, me and Andrew, I think we close mic'd everything, but we had close room mics. We had room mics that were a little bit further back. We had room mics that were completely so far away that if we didn't edit the samples before you guys got them, there would be such a pre-delay that you wouldn't even want it. You'd hit the drum would hit, and then by the time the sound got to the mic, there was it was not a second delay, but it was unusable. Like 300-400 millisecond delay in some of these scenarios. I think there was one location. I think it might have been. Oh, which one? I think it was the hangar. The hangar was literally a decommissioned aircraft hangar that had been turned into a winery, and so lots of it was just a big open space, concrete floors. I can't remember, open truss roof, the whole thing, and it had like a balcony where they had a bar, and it was at the completely opposite end of where the drums were set up, and so as we're having somebody hit the drums, we're walking around trying to hear like where does it sound cool, and you can kind of find spots where like there's a buildup of low end, or there's like the mid range kind of somehow just kind of gets ducked a little bit for whatever reason, the way all those sound waves are combining and comb filtering together, and so we'd put a mic there, and one of the spots we found was like completely on the other end of this thing. And like I said, when we recorded it and then played it back, there was such a pre-delay because it was so far away that we had to actually move the whole the whole recording of that pair of room mics to be closer to the actual hit. So so get lots of room mic options. And then trying to think if there's anything else that's, I mean, obviously, regardless of ambience sample packs, I mean, this is just for any sample pack that you're doing, or not with sample pack, but even if you're just doing a single sample for your own sake, is get good sounding drums and get somebody who can tune them well and then also hit them well. That's a big thing. Sometimes I find, even just whoever's hitting the drum can make the difference between whether like that sounds good or that sounds awesome or it sounds kind of underwhelming. So, all right, there you go. Hopefully that was helpful, Kevin. I'm going on to the next question here from Pablo Lafroja. Hopefully I got close. Also a subscriber. He says, he asks, when recording an album for more than one song, do you have just one session in Pro Tools? I usually have different session per track, but wanted to try it last a month and got overwhelmed. The only time I'll put everything in one session is if it's a live recording. So thanks, Pablo. Cut me some slack. The only time that I'll do it is if it's live. And because in that scenario, I kind of want everything to be the same. It's probably going to play top to bottom. It's probably not going to have multiple takes. And it's just for me, that's a different beast. I want it to play down very consistently. I'm not necessarily going to have one guitar, set up one track layout for one song, and then the next song is going to be completely different. But when I'm doing an album for a band, studio album, each song has its own session. Each song is kind of its own beast. And if I ever, and basically when we're recording, I'll have a tracking template. And then for each new song, I'll import the tracking template into that session. And then we'll use that as a starting point. If we do something while we're working in let's say, song number 1, that's cool. And in song number 2, we want that. I'll just import those tracks in, or I'll import those plugin settings into the song 2 session. And you can make notes, keep track of what you like, keep track of what's in what. Be like, okay, what drum samples did we use in that song? Or what bass chain did we use in that song? Or what vocal effects did we use in that song? You can keep notes, and that way it's really easy to reference. But no, I very rarely keep. I've never done an album in one session. It's always been if I'm let's say I'm mixing a live show, I will put that in one thing. So. I could see you getting overwhelmed. I could see anybody getting overwhelmed if they tried to put a whole album in one. So, thanks for the question, Pablo. Let's see. I think there was a few more. All right. I'm gonna butcher this name. I apologize. Jiraj Fajnor. I know I've just butchered it. I'm so sorry. Thank you for doing this. Oh, dude, I appreciate it. Big fan of Nickelback, and your production was mixing. Was wondering if you could share how you went about the sound of the slide guitar parts in Million Miles an Hour in the bridge section. Oh man, that's an interesting question. A very ambient part. You know what? Here's the thing. It's like when you're doing those big, slidey kind of ambience things, we may have had a volume pedal that helps kind of cut off the attacks. You can kind of swell into it. And it's just about getting a sound that's not too harsh. I think that's the thing with slide is sometimes it can just kind of ice pick, right? Just getting a sound that's not too harsh. And then I just like drowning ambient slide parts with long reverbs, with long decays and delays. So I might go kind of like a dark delay that's kind of bouncing all over the place, and maybe feed that into a reverb. For me, it's about ambience. It's about just creating this soundscape, and I almost want it to sound a little bit like maybe a little bit like a keyboard, or a little bit like a pedal steel even. But yeah, I think ultimately we were probably just kind of like messing around trying to make it just kind of ambient. I mean, the whole song is kind of, you know, being a little like psychedelic. So we just kind of wanted to create that feeling of things kind of swimming all over the place, and so that kind of did that part. There was another question here about Atmos mixing. Have you done any yet? Any and recording techniques for immersive audio? So this is actually a really, really, really big question, and I'm contemplating doing a whole live stream episode on this. A little history with me in and Dolby Atmos. I've got a really good friend who works at Dolby, and back before Dolby Atmos, I think, had been announced, they invited me over to kind of get a sneak peek of what they were doing. I mean, obviously, we knew what Dolby Atmos was for the movies, but we didn't know what the kind of what the impact was going to be on music. And so they kind of gave me a sneak peek of that. They played some stuff that they had mixed, kind of at more as like almost an experiment. And then they actually very graciously they let me go into it. They've got a theater that has a awesome like mix setup, and it's probably I don't know 100 seats in that place. Like it's a big theater, and I think there was like 50 speakers. Like it's crazy. And so they invited me in to do some mixes, and I will tell you, when I went there and I did those mixes, I think I took a Shinedown song. I think I took a Nickelback song, and I might have taken whatever I was working on at the time. This is probably, man, this might be like 7 years ago. Like this was a while back, 7 years ago, maybe. And they just wanted me to like play around with the tools and kind of give them some feedback and blah, 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 and just kind of get excited about it. I took in sessions where really, really dense mixes. Here's one. Off the, what album was it? Feed the Machine. There was a song called Coin for the Ferryman. Super dense mix. Very, very dense. Lots of stuff going on. Like just insane amounts of layering and vocals and guitar parts and just lots and lots and lots of layers. And so I took that song in, and I mixed that song. I don't even know if the album had come out, but the mix was done. And so I took everything off, all the plugins off. I just took into like kind of like a blank session. And I will tell you, within about a half hour maybe, in that room, with very little EQ, very little compression, very little anything, I took probably one of the most dense mixes that I'd ever done, and just being able to spread it around in an hour with very little treatment and processing and carving and this and that and the other, all the tricks that we do to make, 10 pounds of shit fit in a 5-pound bag. Within an hour, I had a mix that when you would switch back and forth between the stereo mix and the Atmos mix, it wasn't even a contest. Like the Atmos mix sounded so superior. And I was blown away. Like, I know everybody says that. You hear that. There's a little bit of an echo chamber. And now things become a little bit more controversial based off of kind of where I'm going to go with this. And this is the thing that I'm still battling with a little bit in regards to Atmos. 100% without doubt, if you are sitting in an Atmos studio listening to an Atmos mix that was done well, obviously. Okay, so let's just assume that we're talking about a great stereo mix and a great Atmos mix, because obviously let's just say that's kind of like status quo, right? In an Atmos studio or in an Atmos listening environment where you're sitting in the right spot and the speakers are all doing their thing and everything's calibrated and the mix has been done properly and all that stuff, Atmos, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, every day of the year will be a more exciting listening experience. Let's call it that. Okay, I'm not going to say it sounds better. I'm just saying it's a far superior experience. My problem is, how does that translate beyond that studio, outside of that studio. And that's my problem that I've had, number one, so far, is the record companies, the mixing, the Atmos engineers, or the mixing or the mastering guys that have Atmos studios, the speaker companies, and some of the other companies, the pro audio equipment companies that are making stuff specifically for Atmos, the musicians. I'm getting to something here, so bear with me. The musicians who are going to the studio to hear it and to sign off on these mixes, all of them will tell you how amazing Atmos is because they are experiencing it the way it needs to be experienced. I have yet to experience that same thing outside of an Atmos studio. Unfortunately, 99.9% of the music consuming public will never hear an Atmos mix in an Atmos theater or an Atmos studio or a proper Atmos listening environment. So this is where there's an imbalance of Atmos everything, but I listen on a sound bar, and yeah, it kind of does the thing where it just kind of makes it sound a little like phasey and 3D cool, I guess. The Apple Music, the Apple Spatial, all of the binaurals, like all of the different formats that are pumping this out of 2 channels. To me, I have yet to hear, and I know it's tougher with rock music just because of what we're doing with rock music in terms of like the frequencies, guitars. We're very nitpicky about the frequencies of the guitars. So when you start panning them around in Atmos and then you hear them through 2 channels that's trying to create the spatial thing, the way to get that is to kind of fuck with the frequencies. And now that guitar sound that we spent 3 days getting, or that guitar player has been dialing in that tone for his entire life, now just gets completely cannibalized because the frequency response is very different. So again, this is a very long-winded thing. We could do an entire live stream episode on this, and like I said, I've been planning to. I just haven't kind of gotten prepped and organized enough to really do it in such a way where we're really comprehensive on this. So I think there's a lot of potential. I think unfortunately the technology is still not Atmos itself. I think it's like the playback, how they get it to come out of 2 channels, earbuds, stereo speakers. Like even in cars, I know now all the car companies are scrambling to get Atmos, and it's like, that's cool if you buy a new car, but what about everybody else? So it feels odd to me that how prevalent it's become, and there's only a small part of the population that's actually experiencing it the way that makes it superior. And I will tell you all this. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think, and I've told a lot of people this, and they've been like, what? Even people who like are kind of tech people. Most devices default to having some sort of spatial playback on. So unless you go turn it off, you're probably listening to the spatial mixes. And this is what kind of bums me out a little bit. You might go and listen to a mix that I did the stereo version, but I didn't do the Atmos version, and you might not know what you're listening to. And that bums me out. So please go look at the settings, go into the audio, look to see if spatial playback's turned on. If you're listening through earbuds or stereo speakers, I turn it on if you want, but I don't listen to the spatial, the Apple spatial stuff. I listen to stereo, unless I'm in an Atmos studio, obviously, and I've got 14 speakers and the proper stuff. Like I'm typically not doing it. So, in terms of actually music production for Atmos, once we have a platform to where we can actually, reproduce this properly, I would say that's when I'm going to start making production decisions for Atmos. So it says when you turn off spatial, you're just getting a stereo fold down of the Atmos mix. Unfortunately, at least with Apple Music, I do not believe that's true. I think you get a fold down depending on what headphones you're listening to. So if you have spatial turned on, again, don't quote me on this. I've gone like I was on the bleeding edge of this for a while, and unfortunately, some of the technology companies just weren't listening to the content creators to do what we wanted them to do. But there is a way on Apple Music to hear the stereo mix, not a stereo fold down of Atmos, to hear the stereo mix. And I believe if you turn off spatial, you are hearing the stereo mix. If you leave spatial on, but you have, let's say you just have your Sony headphones plugged into your, through a lightning jack or something, that will play a stereo fold down, I think. So maybe somebody can put a link if there's an article either with Dolby or Apple that kind of explains the. See, here's the thing. This is insanity. Now I'm mad. This is insanity that we don't know. This pisses me off. Bear with me for a second. I don't want to turn this into a negative thing, but this, pardon my language, fucking pisses me off. We don't know what we're listening to. You guys don't know what you're listening to when I don't know what I'm listening to. Everybody who's here, we all bust our ass all day, all night, all year. Our entire lives are dedicated to making these productions, to making these mixes, these recordings, all this shit, like just so exactly what we want and so high quality, all this stuff. And then when we spit it out to the DSPs, are people hearing my mix? I have no idea. Now, obviously, the Atmos mix is derived from my mix, but this is insanity. And by the way, then these DSPs are saying, if you don't give us an Atmos mix, we're not going to put you on a playlist. Insanity. Whew, I should have opened that bottle of wine. Wow. Okay, come on, camera, focus. my camera's like, I don't want to focus on this. All right, let's see if my camera will focus. No, it doesn't want to. It says you're being an asshole, Chris. Exactly. Where are my eyebrows? Look, you know why my eyebrows fell out? Because I'm stressed out about this fucking spatial bullshit. No, you should have asked that question. It's a good question, and it needs to be spoken about. All right. At some point, my camera will start focusing again. I apologize, guys. All right. There was a couple more emailed questions that I'll get to. Oh God. Okay, camera's in focus. I can continue. Now that I've calmed down the camera's like, I'm going to stop focusing until you get your shit together. All right, I got my shit together now, okay? I'm back. Okay. This is a great question. I got a really good question. This is from Matthew Mariani. He's also a subscriber, and he emailed in a question. He says, do you, this is in regards to Nickelback. He said, did you have any discussions with Joey Moy on his engineering process, vocal chains to maintain some of their sound? So Joey, Joey's awesome. Just does like pretty much the best work out there. He did a lot of the Nickelback albums before I did. And so that's a great question. I didn't. So when I started working with Chad, obviously they had a studio. Well, Chad had a studio, and he had equipment. So when we'd go and do stuff, we would just start with kind of what they had used in the past. But ultimately, you know what? To be honest with you, like it's not a huge. It wasn't really a huge consideration. I was a huge fan of Nickelback and Joey, and I still am. And so I already knew what Nickelback was supposed to sound like, right? I didn't have to be like, oh, I think I'm going to change Nickelback's sound. Like, I know what they're supposed to sound like, but how I go about getting there, or how I'm going to make things sound good to me and sound good to Chad and the rest of the band, and however that then kind of morphs itself into the album or the song is, or the record, is kind of just it's a little bit of an organic process in that regards. So no, a conversation didn't take place regarding that. I mean, I would love to pick Joey's brain on a bunch of other stuff, just kind of outside of Nickelback or whatever. But yeah, that we never really did that. If you hear a good demo, do you try to keep a lot of the original record, or do you tend to re-record? What is your preference? As you guys know by now, I'm very I try to be very intentional. I try to be very purposeful. So if something doesn't need to be redone, then I typically don't redo it. If something needs to be redone, or if we think we can make it better, well, then we'll try. It kind of just doesn't matter to me. Like I'm not super precious with keeping it or redoing it just for the sake of redoing it. So it's kind of specific to whatever it is. I don't really have a preference on that. And then there's another question here from Matthew. Recording acoustic guitar seems to be a personal pain point. Just sounds too basic initially recorded. Do you have any starting point tips to get the sound off to a good start, aside from pick and string selection? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some starting points for me. Number one, a good sounding guitar. And I know good is very subjective. When it comes to acoustic guitars, I like big and bright sounding acoustics. I love Taylor dreadnoughts. I love like Gibson, like J45s or Gibson Doves. Even like, you know, with the Nickelback guys, they've got a lot of jumbos. They've got like SJs that sound awesome. But I personally like fresh strings, and I like them to be bright, and having a big bright sound. And typically my kind of starting point for recording an acoustic guitar, number one, is try to record it in, I don't want to say a dead room, but I like to record the acoustic guitar as kind of like non-ambient as possible, and then add it later if I want to. So I will try to get it in as dead of an area as possible, or if you have to put up gobos around, whatever. I'll gravitate towards a small diaphragm condenser, KM84, AKG 451, a BNK, typically cardioid. And I will typically kind of start it pointed straight at where the neck meets the body. See if I got an acoustic guitar handy here. Let me go grab an acoustic guitar and I'll show you. Give me 1 second. Okay. So, acoustic guitar. Pretty much right here, I will put a microphone maybe 6 inches away. I'll put a microphone like 6 inches away, maybe 8, maybe 10, depending on what the part's played. If it's like an arpeggiated finger picking part, I'll usually go a little closer. If it's big strums, I'll back it off a little bit. But that's usually my starting point, is pointing it at where the neck meets the body, and anywhere between 6 and 12 inches away. So, like I said, kind of right here. And I don't know if you guys can hear this, but it's like, the mic positioning on an acoustic guitar is like super, super important. And so just, you know, if you get too close to the sound hole, you can start getting boomy. If you get too far away, it starts kind of sounding a little like scooped. It's, yeah, that's kind of it literally is mic positioning for me and picking the right mic. So that's the other thing. If you're recording a guitar that's maybe not as bright as you want, or maybe it's too bright, it's too plinky, you need a little more body, that's when I'll go to maybe a large diaphragm condenser and start changing that out and trying to get the different flavor. But that's kind of my starting point. So hopefully that will help. And last question from Matthew. From a business standpoint, if somebody is just into writing demos and they are pitching them out, from a producer-artist standpoint, should the writer spend the extra money having somebody mix it? Will a great song be passed if the mix is bad, or do good artists see around that? This is an awesome question. I'm trying to... What's the best way to answer this? For me, it doesn't matter. Here's the problem. If you write a song and you demo a song and it sounds, let's say, 6 out of 10, let's just say, okay? You send that to me, I can hear through all that. And I'm not expecting it to be great. I'm like, oh, cool. I hear the hook. I hear what the song is. I hear, like, I can hear, like, almost in real time, I'm hearing what the finished product would sound like, right? I'm hearing the finished record in my head, even though I'm hearing kind of like a rough demo. Here's the problem. You don't know where that pitch might be going. You don't know where that demo, whose desk that demo is going to show up on, or who's going to play that demo. And that demo might end up in somebody's email inbox that would otherwise be like, okay, we're going to cut that song for this big artist, but they can't hear past that. They need it to sound done. They need it to sound mixed. They need you to connect all those dots and paint that picture for them. They can't fill in the blanks. There are a lot of people in our business that don't have the ability to hear past a slightly out of tune vocal, or a guitar part that is maybe a little too woofy, or they can't even bring themselves to listen to maybe a really bad mix that's really harsh and kind of just block that out, knowing that there could be a great song in there. So it's kind of like, do you have to go and make a finished master? Probably not. But does it need to sound good? I say yes. But when I'm working with a band, or if I'm going to start, like, we're in the talks of working together, they can send me iPhone recordings of, in their kitchen with an acoustic guitar or a piano and just a vocal. I'm fine with that. But like I said, I wouldn't bet your career or bet a big break on somebody being able to hear past that. So again, long-winded question, but there you go. Okay. Thank you for those questions, Matthew. That was awesome. I've got a lot of big kind of deep questions here from Kyle Coffey, who's actually I do one-on-one coaching, and Kyle's one of my awesome coaching clients. So I definitely want to get to his questions. I'm just going to do a few here in the chat. I'm going to go back up to when we started. How's everybody doing? Everybody hanging in? Hopefully. Okay. And then I've also got to go to the Instagram as well. We'll hit the Instagram one as well. So, boom. A lot of thank yous. Thank you guys for tuning in, number one, and for submitting the questions and participating in the chat here. John Cope, what is your process for when you first open a mix? Do you start with bus press processing or input by input for EQ for every channel, then dynamics, etc.? Great question. If you've watched some of the earlier live streams, I am huge on mix prep. So by the time I start mixing, I kind of have a little bit of a head start. And if it's something that I've produced, I've got a big head start because I'm kind of mixing as I go. But to kind of get maybe a little bit technical, once once I'm set up, my mix has been prepped, everything is, I've got my samples laid in. Maybe I've even picked samples because I typically will kind of start there. Sometimes once the mix prep's done, I'll pick a couple samples to start with, just kind of listen to the track, see what it needs, put them in. I've got most of my plugins are kind of on there. I don't start with existing like EQ settings. I start pretty basic unless there's something left over from like a rough mix that I'll use. I typically start by just doing a quick rough balance with just whatever's on the tracks already. I'll do a balance. I'll get the mix to where all the elements are in, move the faders around, get it balanced to where it's like, cool, I hear what this is. Everything's turned on, everything's, audible. And then based off of that, I will do one of two things. I will start doing some mix bus processing. So I'll be like, okay, I know what kind of song this is. I know maybe things weren't printed with dynamic or with like compression. This is going to need to be squashed down dynamically. There's not a lot of that already built in. So I'll probably turn on a mix bus compressor pretty quickly and then mix into it. If a lot of those decisions and a lot of that processing has been baked into the tracks, sometimes I might go half a mix before really turning on a mix bus compressor. And ultimately, I don't really have, I like starting with the drums. I do like starting with the drums and kind of getting that figured out. And then I'll typically go to guitars, rhythm guitars next. Then I'll kind of put in the bass and get the bass kind of feeling good. I'm kind of bouncing around all over the place. And then it just starts kind of building up, and whatever catches my ear, I go and do. And then something else will catch my ear and I'll go and tweak that. And then when something else will catch my ear and I'll go and tweak that. But ultimately, kind of like I said, I make the rough mix first, and then that informs me as to kind of what to do next. So hopefully that wasn't too vague for you. Kayla Sloan, Nickelback question, the song, Does Heaven Even Know You're Missing? Sounds like What Are You Waiting For? Was that intentional? I know the first song was an old demo from the vault, which makes sense. Not intentional at all. Both of those are songs that, Chad kind of predominantly wrote, and obviously, kind of, I think they both do the kind of the most popular chord progression of all time in regards to popular music. So there wasn't any intent at all. I think it's more just kind of I don't want to say coincidence, but the people involved, the people who wrote it, that kind of thing. It just kind of happened the way it happened. So I love both of those songs. I really thought, What Are You Waiting For? Even now when I hear that song, I think that's such a great song. Like, obviously we took a more pop production style with it, but just in terms of a song, like that's one of my favorite kind of in that vein Nickelback songs. So cool. Thank you for the question. Going down the chat here. What are your go-to guitar mics and drum mics for close miking? John Cope, another question. Great question. Okay, let's run through the drum mics really quickly. Nothing too esoteric, I guess. There are a few things that maybe aren't standard. Okay, so for kick drums, I love SM91s, which are the Shure kind of like boundary. It almost looks like a PZM. It's like a boundary mic. You put it in the kick drum. It kind of lays flat on something. For attack and just like the beater sound, I love that. FET 47s as kind of something further out. Audio Technica makes a 4047 that I used forever at the Atrium and at the Chop Shop as kind of like a FET 47 thing, and I actually really like the 4047. I did shootouts with like old awesome FET 47s, and I actually preferred the 4047 quite a few times. So that was kind of our go-to at the Atrium and the Chop Shop. Snare mics, I'm cool with a 57. I'm fine with the 57. I like the Telefunken, I think it's called the M80, which is like a little bit of kind of like a 57-esque. It's just a little kind of fatter and maybe just a little more more everything frequency wise. If there's room to get an SM7 on a snare drum, I like an SM7 on a snare drum. And then I also like the Bayer 201, which is just gives you like a lot of like fatness that that I find like maybe just fills out maybe what a 57 is lacking. So a lot of the times I'll do 2 top mics. I'll do like the Bayer 201 and then like a 57 or an M80 or SM7, something of that nature. Bottom mic, I actually like something kind of bright. If we can get a small diaphragm condenser under there, KM84, 451, all the stuff I mentioned earlier with the acoustic guitars. Toms, actually, this is a great question because this is where I start veering off the path of kind of like your usual suspects. I used to do, especially at the chop shop, I used to do a lot of mic shootouts just for fun because I was young. I'd only kind of use the typical stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I want to know what everything sounds like on everything. So when we would have downtime, I would do shootouts, and I will tell you, 421s on toms, probably the most popular mic on toms, was never in like my top 3 ever. Whenever I would do a tom shootout, it was never in there. And so a couple tom mics that I really like, and one actually I'm trying to get my hands on them as soon as I can for our production workshop. Audio Technica makes a mic called an AE3000, and it's a little side address condenser. It's only like this big, and they're not very expensive. I think they might be like $300 or something like that. It's a condenser mic. It takes a lot of SPL. It's very full frequency. You can fit it in tight places, and it sounds great. And so that's actually one of my favorite tom mics. If room isn't an issue, I love KSM 32s, but that also brings in problems with cymbals. Like when I'm sampling toms, I'll usually do KSM 32s. And then the other thing that I like a lot are the little Earthworks kind of like clip-on mics. I like those quite a bit as well. For overheads, again, not necessarily the kind of the most popular thing. For overheads, there's a couple things here. Number one, for me, because I set up room mics all over the place, I typically am not the guy who likes to get, there's some people who the overheads are like, I want the whole kit to be the overheads. For me, I don't like that. I like the overheads to be predominantly cymbals. So I like small diaphragm condensers. I actually use 3. I'll use a left, center, and right, and I'll bust them down to a stereo track most of the time. Sometimes I'll leave them separate. And I set them up in such a way where you're getting more of the cymbals. I'm not trying to get the snare sound out of the overheads. I'm not trying to get the kick sound or the tom sound out of the overheads. Yes, you're going to get that. That's going to bleed into it. But I like picking mics and setting them up in such a way where they're really focused on the cymbals. So I might put a second set of overheads, but they're almost like a room mic for me. Like I might use like some Coles really like up high. Like I think that's what we do at Daniel Adair's place. So we'll have small diaphragm condensers getting the cymbals, and then like literally probably 15 feet in the air above the kit, we'll do Coles, and they're almost an overhead, but it's almost like a more of a room mic, but high instead of far from the kit, right? So that goes to our next thing, room mics. I love Coles 4038s. I love U67s. I love M49s. If the studio's got an M50, which is like a spherical Omni mic, those sound great too. So there's lots of room mics. It kind of just depends. Like I like to have like I said, I like to have different flavors. I like to have some room mics that are a little darker. I like to have some room mics that are just like super accurate. Like that's what it sounds like in the room. And then I might have some super hyped kind of big, bright, almost like a flattering kind of pre-EQ'd sound as well. And it just depends on the room, depends on the kit, depends on the part, depends on the place in the room. Another microphone that I love for room mics. I love the Crown PZMs. We used those a lot in the drum soap library, and it's funny when people reach out and they'll be like, "Oh, this I can't remember. It might have been different in each library, but like somebody will say like, what mics did you use on the mid rooms at the the Foundry?" And I'd be like, "Oh, those are the Crown PZMs." They're like, "No kidding, man. They're the best sounding rooms." And so those Crown PZMs really are awesome. And I usually do actually stereo. So I'll put one on one side, one on the other. And those are pretty cool. So guitar recording mics. This I'm relatively pretty kind of standard with. 57s, 421s, Royer 121s. The one that actually I really like that is now more popular because I think a lot of IR libraries include them, but I don't actually know many people who, when they're recording a guitar, use it, is the Bear M160, which is a ribbon mic. I really love that. That's if I just had one mic, if somebody could, here's one mic to record guitars for the rest of your life, that's the Bear 160 to me is like the most balanced guitar sound if you only had one mic. 57s are great, but I always want to balance it out with something else. I want to blend it with either a 421 or a 121 or something else. So, cool. Eric Bergeron, how would you approach mixing a song that's kind of loose, like not super tight with small tuning issues? Would you fix all of this or just mix it as is? Would you turn down the project? There are a ton. I mean, like, pick any classic song from the 70s and it's probably not super tight. There are a ton of awesome songs that aren't super tight when it comes to timing and tuning and all of that stuff. It's just a matter of does it work, or is it like does it suck? There's a difference. And so if you're quad tracking guitars and they're all out of tune, that's going to suck. If you've got one guitar on one side and one guitar on the other, and this one's kind of maybe a little pitchy, but it doesn't really interact with that, and the vocals kind of its own little thing, and it just kind of works, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like rock and roll-ish, I guess, then you can make it work. And you don't necessarily have to go through and fix it. But if this is so like just content dependent, right? It's less about my taste and it's more about like, does this work? Is it tolerable? And then if it's not, if every time that guitar chord comes up in this otherwise great song, it makes you want to turn it off, or it makes you want to like, just like, ew, that's a gross. Like, well, then no, that doesn't work. But if the song plays down and you're not really noticing it because the rest of the song, it's kind of working within the whole context of the whole song, well, then you don't have to fix it, right? There are projects that I have turned down where like the recording is just not, I wouldn't feel good about taking on a project that I wouldn't be able to then be 100% confident in when I'm done with it. And so there have been projects that I've turned down, or I've just said, hey, you know what? I don't know if this thing's quite mix ready. The guitars, there's some timing and tuning issues on the guitars. Unfortunately, like there's no way for me to kind of mix around that or even edit around that because it's all over the place. By all means, like I would suggest you go re-record that stuff. But by all means, if you're like, no, it's fine, I'm just going to have somebody else mix it, I totally get it. No hard feelings. Most of the time, I think people just maybe don't realize kind of how not bad, but how loose it is. And then when somebody else points it out, they start looking and they're like, oh yeah, it could be a lot better. And then they'll go re-record it. So if you can edit around it, I've done that too, where I've gotten mixes from, I've gotten sessions from people that I've mixed where the second chorus has got a couple of guitars that are out of tune, but the third chorus, they're fine. Or let's say the first time they play the chord pattern in the chorus, it's in tune, but the second time it's out of tune. I'll just fly that around. I'll just do that myself. I mean, it takes a few seconds. So, okay, we're back to now. Sorry, I'm catching up on the chat here. We're at my spatial rant. Oh man. Jordan just commented, you hit the nail on the head as far as immersive mixes. Yeah, I know. Oh, Schmerler, what's up, buddy? I need to talk about tube amps to calm me down. I don't know if that calms me down. Sometimes that fires me up even more, but in a good way. So, Dan Campieri. Hi, Chris. I only record my own music. If you have the choice between in the box and using a summing mixer, is there a market improvement in the sonics? Been watching your videos for over a decade. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm assuming you probably watched the old Tommy Lee, the public record recording tips of the day. Yeah, I wish those were still up, but yeah. So this is an interesting conversation I actually had not too long ago with a friend. I do use a summing mixer. I have the Kahayan Epsilon 4000, which is kind of like based around like SSL 4K circuitry ish. And I will tell you this: I do prefer it. But it's not for the reason you think. It's not, I mix in the box and then I sum everything out to this and then I A-B them back and forth and they're like, holy shit, the summing mixer is so awesomely better. It's not that. When I mix into it, I find it, and I do hit it pretty hard. So it's almost like I'm using it as a saturation plugin. And so could I get the same results if I didn't have it? Yes. But it wouldn't be as easy. I would have to think about it more. I would have to just be more conscious of certain things. So for me, my tendency, and actually I've got another question that came in on Facebook that I'll kind of tie this in really quickly. When I first started mixing, let's say when I first started mixing, I was going to say in the box, but let's just say mixing. A lot of my mixes were almost like too transient. And when I say too transient, it's like the kick had lots of attack and transient. The snare had lots of attack and transient. Everything was very transient. The guitars had lots of kind of like mid-range definition and high end, and the vocals were super articulate and everything. And ultimately what happens is you listen back and it's just like all these things are just like poking out at you. And it wasn't good. And I had to figure out a way, no matter how much I tried to not enhance the transient, for some reason, this was my tendency. And I would get to the end of the mix and I'd be just like, what the fuck? Everything's just like, and if you looked at the waveform of the mixes, there would just be like spikes all over the place, right? Not peaks, but like clipping, but like spikes, just the transient. And then there'd be like the rest of the song and you'd see all the kicks and you'd see all the snares, and it was just very transient. That's the only way I can describe it. And so I had to learn, and mixing in the box exacerbated this. This didn't happen as much when I was mixing on a console through outboard gear and blah blah blah. So when I started really mixing in the box, and this problem got worse and not better, and I felt like I wasn't getting any better as a mixer, and I really kind of looked at it objectively, and I'm like, yeah, my mixes are too transient. Like there's not enough meat on the bone. Everything's just transients. And also then you couldn't kind of turn things up. You'd run out of headroom really fast. And so I started having to figure out ways to kind of like, for lack of a better term, like squash the transient, or figure out a way to like bring up the sustain of everything and to make everything not as transient. And so one of the ways that I did that, and one of the kind of the things that was a little bit of like an aha moment for me, and this was like probably 2008, was saturation, but we didn't even call it saturation back then, but it was like using Crane Song Phoenix, for instance. Like there wasn't a lot of saturation plugins. I would use Crane Song Phoenix on everything. I would use Decapitator on everything. Like, and not that it was like, oh, that's super distorted now, but it was just kind of like distorting the transients. Now we use clippers. Now we use saturators. Like, there's a reason why those plugins are like so prevalent now, because that's kind of the thing that we need to do in order to get all this stuff really loud, and almost to be modern sounding. You need to kind of shove the transients down into the rest of the sound. And so what the summing mixer does for me is it just kind of automatically does that. When I'm pushing into it, it just kind of like softens the transient. Not in a really like extreme way. It's very subtle, but it's enough to where it makes mixing for me easier, because that's my tendency. If you don't have that tendency and you don't need the transient softened, or you don't need like the way that when you saturate like a snare drum, it almost like brings up the meat and shoves the transient down and like brings up the rest of it. If you don't need that, like if your problem is like everything sounds like too tubby, or everything sounds like not transient enough, then a summing mixer or all these saturation things that I'm going to talk about probably aren't going to do you much good. They're probably going to work against you. But my tendency was too much transient. And so for me, the trick of being able to mix and have fun and to do it in a way that felt, I don't want to say easy, but easier, and it just lent itself to like, okay, cool, this isn't just a struggle all day long, was to figure out layers of saturation to basically soften the transient without just demolishing the transient, because that's not good either. I like things to be transient. You guys probably know my mixes. Like, I like the snare drum to have smack on it. I like the kick drum to be attacky. Like, I like articulation in mixes. So I don't want the transient gone, but there's a balance that I would always struggle with. And like, I used to use transient designers on everything. And whereas most people are increasing the attack on the transient designer, like I was turning the attack down on all the transient designers. But it's like, that wasn't really solving the problem. It was just like, I was like a Band-Aid approach. So the summing mixer for me is a way to introduce a layer of saturation that I can mix into, and the transients get pulled down and the rest of the stuff kind of gets pulled up. And it's not that it gets pulled up, it's that when the transients get pulled down, everything's a little more like, now it's less transient and the rest of it, and now it's more like little transient and the rest of it's a little more solid, if I'm like explaining this visually. So Keith Robichaux, sorry buddy. Keith actually asked me a question about what my evolution was using the Overstayer MAS box and the Crane Song head converter. And so everything I just explained is also the reason why I use those two things. What I ended up discovering was, for me, different layers of saturation, or different layers of like this harmonic, or different layers of transient softening, instead of doing it with one and smashing the shit out of it, doing it with different boxes that do kind of that they don't all do the exact same thing. They all do it in a different way, and they all might spread out the harmonics in a different way, and they all might have like a different kind of immediacy as to how quickly they soften that transient, let's say. Using different layers, just for me, just solves so many problems. So on, let's say, 75% of the mixes that you guys have heard that I have done, my mix is going out through a summing amp. We're getting some saturation. We're getting some transient softening. We're getting some fatness. We're getting some harmonics that are getting spread out. Okay, go back in. That then goes to the Crane Song head. The Crane Song head has 3 different saturation circuits on it. And I think 2 out of the 3, I can't see the knobs. 2 out of the 3 are doing something. One of them is all the way off. The one that makes everything kind of a little like soft and tubby, that one's off. But the Crane Song head is doing 2 more layers of saturation. 2 different layers of saturation. Okay. Then once I'm in there, depending on what the song needs, I might go out to a hardware insert that then hits the overstayer. And that's another layer of saturation. And so by doing all of these little layers of saturation and, whatever you want to call it, this is just a combination that I found works for me to where when I start doing that rough mix that I was telling you about when I first start, like 50% of those transient problems are solved. I don't have to pull out transient designers. I don't have to go and start adjusting, chopping off, transients on the SSL channel strip. I don't have to start EQing out the attack. Like just so many of those problems are solved just by going through those layers. Again, this works for me. This might not work for what you need, and that's not what this does. It doesn't. And I've done that test, and you can kind of hear it, but you kind of can't. But when I mix through it, I'm like, oh, I got that mix done a lot easier, and I've got less plugins on it, and I didn't arm wrestle with the attack of the snare drum or trying to fit all these things together. Obviously it's always a challenge, but I mean, the things that were always a problem for me, it solved a lot of that. So, there's that. Okay, drums sound familiar when both tracks come in. Kalis Lone. And the drums sounds similar when both tracks come in. I can't quite remember what that was on. Sorry about that. Colton Rudd, do you still do your own editing, or do you have somebody that handles most of that for you? In recording sessions, are you doing any editing on the fly or save that for a separate session? Both scenarios. So in recording sessions, I'm editing all the time. Really quickly, if there's something that's bugging me, we don't need to listen to it for the rest of the day. I'll just go in and fix it. If it's kind of like, okay, we're done the drums, now we're going to go edit the drums, well, then at that point, yes, it will be like a separate session. I still like separating sessions I have a drum editing session where it will be all the drum takes, and it will be a kind of like a rough mix with everything minus the drums, or an instrumental, or maybe it will be like stems. It will be like bass, guitars, vocals, and those will be on stereo tracks, and it won't be the whole session, and I'll use that. And then once the drums are done, I'll import the finished drums back into like my master session, right? Same with vocals. I'll do my vocal editing in a separate session, all the takes. That will be, I'm going in and I'm comping and I'm timing and I'm tuning and doing all that stuff. So it's a little bit of both. But if we're tracking, let's say we're tracking guitars and there's something in the drums that's bugging me. There's a snare hit that's not that strong, or there's a tom fill that's maybe like a little too on the grid and I just want to shift it around. I'll go in and do that really quickly, no problem. Do I have somebody do the editing for me? I do both. I do have some amazing people that work with me that do editing, depending on kind of what I need and kind of how intense it is, and depending on how, like, what the flow of the session is. I still do the majority of my vocal editing, but like guitars and drum timing and stuff like that. I if I can, I won't necessarily do that if I don't have to. Going back to mics, Jordan, Shure Beta 181s or Josephson E22s for toms. I actually did this shootout probably 7 years ago. And here's the answer. This is a really easy answer. If you're paying for the mics, E22s. If I'm paying for the mics, 181s. The E22s did sound better. Excuse me. The E22s did sound better. And I would say the E22s, I didn't mention those in my tom mic roundup. I would put the E22s in some of my, probably like I would put them in the mix of my favorite tom mics. They sounded damn good. The 181s, I think, are maybe a third of the price, maybe half price. For the money, they're not they're like the E22s aren't that much better on toms that I would spend the extra money on them. I would get the 181s. So Octava 012s or O12s. I actually have never used that. I don't even know what it is. So John, you're gonna have to enlighten me next time we see each other. You're gonna have to show me what that is, or shoot me a link or something. As a follow-up question from Colton, what's your take on speed and being able to work fast versus slower but very detailed? Again, talking about being intentional and purposeful and having a system. I like to compartmentalize that. There are certain things that I think, pardon the new age term of hacking. I think you can hack your brain when it comes to mixing or editing or anything kind of in Pro Tools. You can kind of hack your brain by forcing yourself to do certain things fast. I actually have a timer. So there are certain things that I will actually set the timer for 20 minutes, and I'll give myself 20 minutes to do a specific task. And it causes you to focus and to prioritize. Prioritize is the key word there. So for instance, I was talking about doing a rough mix. Give yourself 20 minutes to do a rough mix, and I guarantee you're not going to sit there messing with the the pre-delay setting on the reverb plugin. It doesn't matter. So you prioritize. Once all that other shit's done, once you've got the mix to a point where you're like, cool, I've prioritized, and now the next thing in line is the pre-delay time on the reverb plugin. Cool, do it. But I guarantee you that's not going to be the thing you touch in the 20 minutes. So it kind of causes you to do that. That being said, there are certain things where, and I would say when you're doing editing, when you're doing mix prep and setups, anything that kind of like you want to do once and never have to think about ever again. You want to know it's done right and never, and like doing like kick drum sample or triggers or snare drum triggers or editing acoustic guitars. You're like, I want to get this done and I never want to have to think about it. That I would say work a little slower and be very focused and very detailed and take your time on that and do it once. Do it once and never have to think. It's done right. You never have to think about it again. So I'm like, it's a great question. And so it depends on what you're doing. And I'm very, very aware and I work with intention on how fast I want to do something. Sometimes I force myself to do it fast so I don't get bogged down with the minutia that doesn't matter. And then there's other times where I make sure I give myself a lot of time to do something, because you have to focus on the minutia, and the minutia is the thing that either makes or breaks it. So hopefully that answers that question. Is this Eunice? I did a mix with your drum samples. The label was so impressed by the results. The course on Nail the Mix by Chris is a must-watch for producers. Oh, dude, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, the Nail the Mix was fun, and if you guys haven't checked it out, please do. And there's going to be more. I've got more content in the works. Some mixing courses, some stuff like that. Hint, hint. Teaser. Foreshadowing. I've got some more stuff coming that's kind of along those lines that I think you guys are going to like. So please bear with me. Be patient. I'm trying to get some cool stuff for you guys that will be super informative, educational, and hopefully somewhat entertaining as well. So, okay. Jordan, the Bear 160 is an amazing ride mic. That is a little extravagant. So 57 M160 go-to for last few years, John. Yeah, it's a great one. John Cope used a lot of the Earthworks mics on my past tour and trying out the DPA stuff on tops. So interesting thing with the DPA stuff. Me and Daniel Adair shot out the DPA stuff. I don't know, maybe 8 years ago. One of the albums for Nickelback. we shot out the DPA and the Shure, I think the SM98s. And there was one other one that we shot out. The DPA, the little like DPA tom mics are incredible. They are very expensive. And even when you got a bunch of money to spend, it's hard to justify that much money on tom mics. So that's my only thing. And so the Earthworks for me were when I tried out the Earthworks mics, they were as close to like that DPA stuff. I can't remember the model number of the DPA. They were as close to the DPA as I could get without spending that kind of money on the DPA stuff. So it's one of the reasons why I like the Earthworks. I forgot to say with the drum overheads, I actually use Earthworks SR25s. I skipped right over it. Sorry about that. The SR25s are their cardioid small diaphragm, like super small diaphragm condenser mic. I love the Earthworks mics. I love them. They definitely do not get enough praise and attention. A lot of people have actually never used them. I'm a huge fan. So, Kayla, Nickelback album question: for mixing an album, what are the approximate due date for when it has to be done? Does the band have a release date for the album in place while you are mixing? Sometimes, and I actually like deadlines. I find when things don't have a deadline, that's when, again, the deadline is the calendar version of this. So if you know you've got a week to mix an album, you are going to prioritize like crazy. You're gonna focus on the shit that matters. You're not gonna waste time doing stuff that doesn't need to be done. You're not going to just waffle on which compressor to use. You're going to pick one that's kind of in the ballpark and you're going to make it work and move on. So I love having deadlines, but I would say it's 50-50. When we're doing a Nickelback album, typically we work pretty slow and a deadline is the thing that makes us finish. So, and the deadline is usually, yes, it's kind of like, oh, we need to have it out by this date. So we need to have it finished by this time and that kind of thing. So yeah. Great question. Joe Cross mentioned, glad I'm not the only one had issues mixing to transient. I started running my mixers through a pair of Hairball Lola preamps, switched the line input, and it really helped soften everything. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me how that doesn't get really talked about a lot. Like, I don't hear a lot of people like wanting to soften mixes. Like, like clippers have become all the rage, right? Clippers make things harder. Like think about like a sine wave compared to a square wave. Like clippers give it like almost like a crunch. And it's interesting. I mean, I like using clippers for certain things as well, but it's amazing. Like, I don't hear people being like, yeah, I want to soften everything. Like when you hear soft, especially in like modern rock music, like that doesn't sound appealing. And I don't hear people talking about that a lot. But ultimately, yeah, like I think sometimes you kind of have to, and again, I don't like soft almost makes it sound wrong, but like, yeah, you have to kind of like even out the transients a little bit. You kind of got to smush the transients down a little bit. So, Colton, another question. Colton, thanks for firing in the questions tonight. I love this. Music industry question. Was your intent to make a name for yourself, or did that happen as a byproduct of your passion for music production? Best advice for someone who wants to make a career pivot. I decided when I was 16 years old that I wanted to be a record producer. I wanted to be rich and famous and work with all my favorite bands and be on the cover of Mix magazine and all that shit. Yes, I wanted all of that. As I got older and more mature, that stuff kind of mattered less and less. And it was more about, to be honest with you, I just want people to hear my work. I feel like there was quite a while where I would go do an album, and it would come out and maybe, yeah, people would be like, oh yeah, the new album came out, blah, blah, blah. And then you would kind of never really hear it again. And, this is a little bit of a cliche, but it's like, I was in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and I was checking in at a hotel, and there was a big screen. Well, there's like, music playing in the lobby, and there was like a big screen over in the casino, like playing music videos. And a song that I did came up on that thing, and there's like probably like an hour long lineup, and I'm like, fuck, that's cool. Like that's kind of what I wanted. And so my intent was kind of that. Like I just wanted my work to be out there. I wanted people to hear it. I want to know people are listening to it. It wasn't so much about like, I want my name to be out there, or I want people to know who I am and that I did it. I just want people to be listening to it. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but advice for someone who wants to make a career pivot. Colton, maybe elaborate on that a little bit. You're in music and you want to pivot into something different. You're not in music and you want to be in music. You're a mixer, but you want to be a producer. Like, I think it's such a wide open question. I think ultimately you kind of have to evaluate a few different things. Number one, regardless of what the scenario is. Number one, what are you good at? I think there's a lot of talk about what you want to do or what you really kind of are passionate about or whatever. And then there's like, well, what are you really good at? And I think ultimately, if you're doing something that you're relatively interested in, but you're really good at it, and people want to work with you, and you're doing good work, and because you're so good at it, that's then turning into more opportunities, and maybe it means an increase in income or more working with the people that you want to work. I think that's ultimately going to make you passionate about it. Number one, because it's going to be very fulfilling. So number one, I think if you're going to make a career pivot, I think you got to be like, okay, well, is this thing that I want to pivot to, is that something I'm already naturally good at, or could I be good at if I immersed myself in it? Number one. Number two, is there a demand for that thing? That's the other thing. I like to make the analogy of like you could be an amazing VCR repairman. And for you younger viewers out there, a VCR is an electronics box that you would put a VHS movie tape into and watch a movie on this tape that goes into this machine. I can't believe there's probably people who are watching right now who have actually never used a VHS machine, but there you go. You could be the best VHS repairman in the world, and you could just absolutely eat, sleep, and breathe VHS tapes. I don't think there's that much of a demand for VHS, VHS player repairman. So it's kind of like, can you use those skills for something with a more that's something that's more in demand? And yeah, it's maybe not the exact thing you want to do. Like, I don't know, maybe repairing like PlayStations. I guess, yeah, it's not analog tape. It's not this thing, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? People really like me for it, and they come to my shop all the time, and I can charge a little bit more for my time because there's such an overflow of demand and blah, blah, blah. And that really fulfills you in a way that you're like, yeah, you know what? I'd rather be in demand working on PlayStation repair instead of not in demand doing the thing that I really, 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 really love that nobody really needs anymore. So I think that's the two things that you kind of have to connect a little bit. I've evaluated that in my career a couple times as well. So I've made that conscious decision. I look at it a little bit more as in not so much as like, am I going to career pivot? But for me, it's like, what projects should I go after, or how do I want to position myself to get certain projects? And ultimately, I focus on the work, trying to work with bands and try to doing the projects that just kind of intuitively I fit into well, that they want the sound that I intuitively do, not because they want my sound and because I have a sound, but it's just like, that's the way we hear music. It has been very difficult when I've worked with bands or an artist that just stylistically likes something completely different that I don't like. And I just don't know how to make that music because I'm going to keep changing it to what I like, and that's not what they like. So there's my rant. It's not a rant, but there's my over explanation that I like to always do. So Kayla mentioning the songs. Oh, for the drums. The drums sounded similar the way they came in. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess they kind of have similar beats and kind of like where they came in the song and stuff like that. So yeah. That was in reference to Does Heaven Even Know You're Missing and What Are You Waiting For? Kayla was saying like the drums sounded kind of similar. I mean, those drums were recorded at completely separate times, but yeah, you got the same drummer, you got similar tempo. They're both kind of, similar kind of song arrangement. So there is absolutely similarities, but it was not intentional, and it was just more circumstantial than anything else. So Eric, how do you feel about mixing with open back headphones and Apple earbuds? Great question. I use, where are they? These are the HD 650s, which are open back headphones. I love them. I do a lot of mixing on them. I don't like mixing on Apple earbuds, but I do like mix, like listening to mixes on them. So I'll print a mix, I'll put my earbuds in, and I'll go walk around and I'll make mix notes. I do not like mixing through Apple earbuds. I've actually tried it a couple times, and I don't. It doesn't work for me. Also, do you think I should buy an outboard distressor, even though the Apollo has all the plugins? No. Do you think you should buy a distressor? I used to have distressors. I sold them. It's not that they're no good; they're awesome. And I've got a ton of them at Chad's studio. We use them. The plugins are great. If you're recording and you want to record with the distressor on, like you want to record with compression, yeah. If I just had to have one outboard hardware compressor, it would be a distressor. So if you need an outboard compressor because you need an outboard compressor, get a distressor. They can kind of do everything. I love them. Super highly recommended. But if you don't need an outboard compressor, if you think the outboard part of it is going to give you something that the plugins can't, I would argue that is the case. So also, I would love to see a studio tour of my place. My place is right now where I'm at right now is nothing special. Very bare bones, very residential. I had an awesome studio in LA that I unfortunately had to let go when we came up to Vancouver. I had a purpose-built studio in LA that took me a long time to build, and it was the best sounding control room I'd ever been in. Right now we're actually up in Vancouver. I'm set up in, like I said, it's a very bare bones setup. I think we're probably going to be leaving Vancouver probably in the next few months, and when we land where we're going to land, I'll probably build another studio. Because you know what? I've learned. Here's an interesting thing. I've learned I don't need a big, great sounding studio. I don't need it. I don't listen loud, so when I'm listening on speakers, like my room is big enough that I'm not getting the reflection off the back wall, that kind of thing. I don't listen loud, so I'm not introducing a lot of like the resonance of everything rumbling and bouncing around. Like it just hasn't been that big of an issue. Number one, I've got, like I said, I like mixing on open back headphones. I don't need it, but man, do I like it. I love being able to walk in a room that like a cool studio. It's very inspiring to me. I love setting things up in a really efficient way where everything's set up and nothing has to be moved and everything. There's room to put the thing over there, and there's room to put the thing over there, and the guitars aren't 20 feet behind me. They're right here, so I can grab them and go. So I am very excited kind of to build my next studio, which hopefully isn't too far away. But it's more of a want and more of a almost like an inspirational, creative workspace than it is. I need it. So that's actually been like a little bit of a mind fuck for me, because I was always waving the flag of like, you have to have a treated room with blah, 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 and it needs to be purpose built, and you need to spend a shit ton of money making it right. Don't get me wrong. like I said, my studio in LA was like sounded incredible. It wasn't big, but it was inspirational. It was comfortable. I loved it. I don't need it anymore. Although like I said, I do want it again. So, going down. Dan Campieri again. What is your preferred sample rate for recording? 48K. It's been a while since I've done a comparison. I mean, I used to do this all the time. It's been I came to the conclusion of 48K years ago. 48K to me, not only it's subtle, but I like 48K. I like the sound of 48K better. I find the difference even more noticeable once I started mixing in the box. I don't really know from a technical standpoint. Maybe it has to do with like the EQ boosting and the aliasing cutting, or the Nyquist coming in quicker on 44.1, whatever. I prefer the way that the plugins sound at at 48K. I prefer the way the plugins sound at 96K. But up until probably the machine I'm on now, I've got a newer M1. Well, it's not new anymore, but when I got it, I've got an M1 Mac Studio, and it's pretty loaded up. And I think I would actually like to try 96, doing a session in 96, just to see if it's that much better. I feel like my system could probably handle it now. The system was always the bottleneck, and I like, even if I loved the sound of 96, I could never do a project because there was never enough resources from the system to make it happen. So, yeah. So I should actually do that test. I haven't done it in probably 10 or 12 years. I kind of just picked. I 48 for me was the just not the perfect compromise, but that was the ideal compromise for me. So that's what I still do, 48. And at this point, the difference between 44.1 and 48 in terms of file size and in terms of system resources, I don't know. There's not really a compelling reason to me to do anything less than 48. But did I find the DPA tom mics too papery? I didn't. I didn't, but maybe that had something to do with just the toms we used. I'm trying to remember when we did that shootout. We might have been using 3-ply heads, which are a little less papery. We might have been using, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we might have been using Emperor clear heads. So I could see using like a coated ambassador. I mean, just about any tom mic can has the ability to sound like papery on, if you're using like coated ambassadors. I like thick, like thuddy heads. I love pinstripe heads. I love power stroke heads. I love like Emperor. What are the really thick Emperors? Emperor X's. I prefer, especially on toms, I prefer like the big thuddy kind of shorter decay, less papery heads to begin with. So it might have had something to do with that. Might have been the kit, but I didn't find them papery at all. They were, like I said, when we did the shootout at Daniel's place, might have been when we were doing Feed the Machine. I think it was when we were doing Feed the Machine. I think the toms on that album, I think, were DPAs. I think we borrowed them. When we were shooting them out, I think we borrowed them for the entire album. And then when we were done the album, I think we didn't end up getting them. I think they were just too expensive. ATM 25s on toms. Yes, they are. Those are classic. I know a ton of guys that's their preferred mic. So, Mr. Schmerler, favorite or most used channel in the CB4? Good question. I'd probably say channel 3. That should not be a surprise. If the CB, well, the VH4, if the diesel VH4 was a 1-channel amp and it was channel 3, I think that alone would probably put it in the upper echelon of best amps of all time. That being said, channel 2 is massively underrated and massively underutilized. So it's a little finicky. Channel 2 is a little finicky, but if you can get the right combination of guitar and the right combination of part, and just get the kind of the gain structure and the EQ kind of set just right, Channel 2 is, again, I feel like Channel 2, there are single channel amps that do what Channel 2 does, that are, people will spend $2,000 on one of those amps. And it's like, yeah, that's probably the least used channel on the VH4. Somebody else is making a whole amp based around. So yeah, good question. And if people aren't familiar with the CB4, shameless plug, CB4 is a plug-in of emulation of my personal VH4. You can find it at mlsoundlab.com. Chris Baseford, whatever. You search ML Sound Lab CB4 in Google and you'll find it. So, all right. Chris is saying right now about playing to your strengths and demand versus just trying to force what you want is super key. Yeah, Jordan, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a kind of a good way to articulate it. Kayla, I noticed San Quentin has the same guitar siren sound for a second in the next track on the album Skinny Little Missy, or something, but I heard a similar sound. Was that on purpose? What are you getting at, Kayla? Are you saying we just use the same shit in every song and we just do the same song? No. I think what you're talking about is the toot toot in Skinny Little Missy. And that doot doot is actually Chad going doot doot that we just distorted the shit out of and made it kind of almost sound like a guitar. The siren thing is like this weird kind of dissonant chord. So two different things. Honestly, when there are holes in the production, both me and Chad just kind of always want to put something in them. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a guitar part, and sometimes it doesn't have to be sometimes it can just be a sound. And so like obviously the siren in San Quentin was a specific thing, but that little sound in Skinny Little Missy, that was just, we were hearing that, both of us heard that sound. We needed something in that thing just to pull your ear away for a second and just to kind of fill that spot and to give it a rhythmic element, or just change the sonic spectrum for a second. So no, not intentional at all. It was just, that was what we heard there. And you know, what you're hearing, I think what you're hearing with these similarities between songs is just we have tendencies as producers to be like, you know, even as engineers or as mixers, it's like, well, what do you want a snare drum sound like? So if you listen to a snare drum in Nickelback and then you listen to an album I mixed for a completely different band in a year from now, and you're like, oh, the snare drums sound the same. And it's like, well, yeah, because I like snare drums sounding that way. So I'm just going to tweak it until it sounds the same. So like the shout to burn it to the ground in San Quentin. Yeah, you're hearing tendencies. What you're hearing is, you know, you're hearing a guy who likes to write and writes a certain way. I'd say probably anybody who's watching right now or anybody who's made music, there are things that they do over and over and over again, not out of any sort of conscious decision of, it's just like, yeah, we need to put something there. So what are we going to do? It's like Rob Zombie in every song. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's like, yeah, it's in every song. Was it on purpose? Well, no, it's just what he does. It's what he likes to do. He likes putting it there. There's a hole. He's going to fill it with something. He does it, right? So, have I ever tried mixing front of house? Not exactly, but I used to not be interested at all. And I've started to become a little like curious. And so, I'm just not like, I'm like, how do you practice that? Because like, you can't go do that in an empty arena. Doesn't sound the same as one with 15,000 people. And so that's the part that I'm just like, huh. Here's the thing. Does anything in the studio translate? You ask any of the live guys, and it's funny because this happened recently where I went to some production rehearsals as kind of like a QC guy, and kind of all the live guys were like, yeah, those studio guys don't know what they're talking about. That doesn't work like that out here. Sure, it's a different ball game completely. It is a completely different ball game, but I think it's less about what it's supposed to sound like and more about how you make it sound that way. For instance, I want a snare drum. We'll use the snare drum. I want a snare drum to sound a certain way. I find it hard to believe there's not a way to get the snare drum in a live show sounding as good as the or similar to the album snare drum. How you go about doing it, I think it's a completely different skill set. That's the thing that interests me, is like I would be really curious to figure out how could I make a rock show sound album-like, let's say, studio-like, but in an arena, and obviously with the added ambience, and obviously you're getting like, you know, the extra stuff that's there. But I find that very interesting. So I don't think it doesn't translate one-to-one. But yeah. Jordan doesn't dig distressors. Yeah, no, something wrong with you, man. Something wrong. You must not have drank the Kool-Aid yet. Surrender Stella. Hey, Chris, did you guys use real amps on San Quentin, or was it all DI? I believe it was all DI. When you say DI, it was all amp sim. I think I talked about this. It's hard for me to remember, but I'm pretty sure that was Axe-Fx for a bunch of it and CB4 for some of the layers. So, yeah. Thanks for your input, Jordan. Yep. Jordan's awesome in these. I appreciate all the comments and all the participation. So keep it up, Jordan. VH4 Channel 2 crew, all knobs dimed, bright on. Yes, exactly, right? Evan, always in search of professional stems for my favorite productions. They're extremely difficult to come by. Can you explain why that is from a producer standpoint? Well, there's a couple different reasons. Obviously, copyright. Like you need to, somebody's got to give people permission to put them out there. I think a lot of artists probably don't want all the stuff sold separately, for lack of a better term. They don't want the drum tracks out there on their own, and then somebody remixes it, and then all of a sudden there's a new mix that's not their mix, and that, like, I think there's just a bunch of reasons why, like, that's not what the intent was, or that's not what the artist wants to be out there. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why the guys at URM are so, like, well, not like the obviously there's a bunch of reasons why the guys at URM are awesome, but one of the awesome things about the Nail the Mix stuff is they've been able to, like, that's not easy to get people to agree to do that. Bands, labels, that's not easy. I've gone down that road, and they've been able to provide a lot of multi-tracks. And as long as people don't abuse them, I think what happens is people, like, bands and artists, are being more comfortable giving permission to do that, because the thing that they're scared of happening isn't happening. The minute people start going and posting remixes of San Quentin on Spotify under a different artist name, that's the minute people stop doing it. The minute, people start taking that stuff and doing something maybe kind of shitty, maybe they do their own, like, weird mashup, and, they tune it, take the vocals and tune them all fucked up and make it sound bad, and then put it out there on a YouTube video. That's the minute this stuff stops happening, and people are like, nope, never doing that again. So as long as people are respectful and kind of use it for the right reasons, I think people will be, bands and artists are being more open to either releasing that kind of stuff or letting other people utilize it for various things. So yeah, good question. I use them to compare my own DIs to other tracks to see if they're at the party. It's a great way to do it, right? It kind of gives you an idea of kind of where a good kind of barometer could be, I guess. Do I use the default speaker impedance curves on the Axe-Fx, or do I pick one in particular? I use the LB2UK for most of my presets. You know what? I've only recently kind of started experimenting with those. I typically use, like, I think the default follows whatever amp model you pick, and then that kind of is kind of like, well, what would most people plug this thing into? So it kind of follows that. But I'll play around with it a little bit, and I'll just kind of scroll through a bunch of them and just kind of see if something works. But again, it's like I don't really start tweaking that unless I need to. So if I find an IR that works really well, and I'm like, this sounds fucking awesome, and I do a couple EQ moves, like the impedance curve is further down on my list of priorities. Kind of again, when I was talking about, if I'm looking for an Axe-Fx preset, I like to give myself 5 minutes to get this thing sounding good, or find a different one. If I'm working, if I'm just playing around and I'm experimenting and I'm practicing, that's when I kind of experiment with that stuff, some of the deeper stuff. But yeah. Sorry about the Canucks losing to Edmonton. I know, what a heartbreak. They almost pulled it off. It was fun though. Got to go to a game. Obviously, you guys saw the video there. Got to go to a game and watched a lot of those games. This Vancouver is such an awesome hockey city, and the Canucks are just an awesome organization. So yeah, that was cool. How do you EQ, compress, and saturate toms to fit in a song? What are you looking for in a tom that makes it fit into a song? Kind of depends on the part. I mean, if it's just a big tom fill, like that's the thing. Oh man, that's such a wide open question. I think that maybe some of the tendencies with toms is to add too much low end into them, or leave too much low end into them. I think also a tendency that I have is to make them so bright that they don't even sound like part of the kit. So I've been really focusing on that a lot lately, when I EQ toms and I add a bunch of top end and a bunch of attack to them. And then, when the toms come in, it almost sounds like an overdub. That is not ideal. So I've been very, very, very cognizant of that. And then I guess I say with the saturation thing, same thing as we were talking about earlier with the overall mix. I find it's very easy, the way that I like toms to sound. It's very easy that once you have everything in the mix, that the only thing that you can hear is the transient. So using saturation to kind of then just squash everything together and just kind of shave off that transient can also be a really big advantage when treating a tom. I carve out a lot of like the kind of the honk and the low mid kind of just mud. I carve into toms pretty hard, and I'm not, like I said, with the saturation, I'm not afraid to squash them down. So that way they're, there's not a lot of room for them. Typically in a mix, there's not a lot of room for them, but they need to be big. So that's the challenge, is like, how do you make them come across as big, but not actually be big? And that's, a lot of pretty drastic EQ most of the time. So, man, we're getting down to the end of these questions. Your opinion about different DAWs about sound quality. I'm probably the least informed and educated and experienced person to answer that question. If you told me Logic sounded way better than Pro Tools, I still don't think I would switch. For me, I think whatever you're on, whatever you're mixing through, whatever DAW you're using, unless there's a real bad deficiency, unless it's kind of like this DAW is really fucking things up, I think I'm personally, I'm gonna, if one, let's say Logic is let me come up with a scenario. Let's say Logic is the most accurate in and out, right? You put this in and it comes out the most accurate it can be, okay? Let's say Pro Tools has a slight dip in the top end and a bump at 50 hertz. It doesn't. Let's say hypothetically. All that means is I'm probably going to carve out a little 50 hertz and I'm probably going to add a little bit of top end. And I'm not doing that because I know what's going on. I'm just going to keep tweaking until it sounds the way that I want. So I'm going to overcome whatever sound the workstation has to make it sound right for my ears. So again, if I'm using a piece of gear if I'm using a microphone that's dark, that probably just means I'm going to add some top end to it. There are subtleties and nuances as to how that whole thing kind of works together. But ultimately, what I'm saying is I'm going to tweak and I'm going to treat to get it to sound the way it sounds in my head, or the way that I want it to sound, or as close to that as possible, regardless of what I'm using or regardless of what things sound like. I'll do more or less or this or that or whatever. To me, the outcome, again, unless we're talking about something that's like, when I put a guitar into it, it comes out a piano. Well, that's a problem. But as long as it's somewhat of a representation, an accurate representation of what I'm recording, I'm ultimately just going to be making my decisions off of what I'm hearing. So I'll be making different decisions. So, John, got to watch Nickelback at BC Stadium in March. Come hang out with Joe. We played the next night. It was awesome. Haven't seen a show like that. Yeah, that was great. So BC Stadium, that was the festival, I think. Yeah, dude, Joe's awesome. And the Nickelback shows usually sound really good, and it's a big rock show. So yeah, I'm sure that was really cool. Okay, that's all we got in the chat. I'm gonna go to another one of my my coaching clients. If you guys are in the Discord, server, I think he's in there as Slam House. He actually asked us a question on our last coaching call. He wanted to know a little bit about kind of like file management and hard drive partitions and some of that stuff. And like, where do I install samples? Do I have separate sample drives? Like a lot of this kind of like system configuration stuff. And I've been debating whether or not to do a whole live stream episode about that. File management, backup, archiving, hard drives, where you put your sessions. Do you use the system drive? Do you not use the system drive? Do you have your samples on a separate drive? Your SSDs versus physical disks, all that stuff. In my brain, all of that stuff is super important, and it's stuff that I do focus on and I consider, and I am somewhat well informed on. That just sounds so unappealing to do a live stream about. And the only reason is because I don't think you guys want that. So if that would be interesting or informative or educational, is it the sexiest thing? No. Is it the most like enlightening thing? Probably not. But is it important? Absolutely. Especially when we're talking about like doing nightly backups or file transfers or that type of stuff. That is a thing where you kind of have to have your shit together if you want to be working as a professional. And there doesn't seem to be like a really set way to do it. So I feel compelled to share how I do it, but if you guys don't care, I won't bother. So if that's something that you guys do want to hear about, just give us a little thumbs up in the chat here, or if you're watching later, put a comment below saying thumbs up to the boring live stream, thumbs up to the file management one. But I see another question here. Surrender Stella, how do I find a link to your Discord? If you're already subscribed to my newsletter, I believe it's included on all the newsletters that go out. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, go to my website and sign up. We usually send out an email every week with something different in it. Sometimes it's something kind of, like I said earlier, like a Axe Effects preset, a Pro Tools template, a worksheet. Sometimes it's just me sharing some news of what's going on or what's coming up. So it's not like it's not super spammy. So yeah, go sign up and it will be there. Divide Music might be late, but monitors of choice. You know what? So right now I'm using the Neumann KH310s. Monitors are an interesting question, and this is a conversation. This is a big conversation. And I won't get too deep into this, but I will say anybody who tells you one monitor is quote unquote better than another without giving you what the criteria is, just disregard. Just disregard. There has to be a qualifying criteria for what's better. Because I'll tell you right now, what's better for me might not be better for you. Again, my tendency is to mix with too much transient. If I mix with a speaker that doesn't enhance the transient or at least give me the transient properly, I'm not going to be able to address that. So there are some speakers that I find to be less transient. They almost like kind of they're already softening the transient more than others. Those are terrible for me because I think my transients are in a good spot and they're not. And so that's not good for me. Somebody who tends to mix really bright and they're like, my mixes are always way too bright. Well, if you get them a monitor that's a little bit dark, that's going to be a problem for them, right? They're going to add more top end. You need to qualify what's better. You need to figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. You need to mix through it. You can't just listen to music. Like, for instance, I'd say every 3 or 4 years, I A/B everything and I go do a speaker comparison. I'm on the hunt. I'm always on the hunt for the perfect monitor. I don't think the perfect monitor exists. I think everything is a compromise. For me, for you, it might not be. For me, it's either I mix really well on it and it helps me solve all of my problems, but I hate listening to them. Like the NS10s, perfect example. NS10s for me were some of the most effective tools, but I could not stand listening to them. I couldn't stand mixing through them. It wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable. I didn't like listening to music through it at all. But it made me do the things that I needed to do in order to get a good mix out of the back end, right? There are speakers I love listening to music on. When I do mixes on them, my mixes suck. The Neumanns for me were, like I said, I can go into very specific details. It's not just about frequency response. For me, it's about time decay. That's a big thing for me. So I tend to gravitate towards sealed cabinets because their time decay is very different. How long the frequencies kind of hang around are very different than like ported cabinets. So I tend to gravitate towards certain things, but it's a big when people talk about like the NS10s and the frequency response, that's not what it was about for me. It was about the sealed cabinets and the way that there wasn't a lot of sustain of the frequencies. They came out and they died away very fast. So okay, good. People are interested in this file management and hard drives and all this boring shit. Cool. Okay, well, I will put that in the queue. I will actually do that. Okay, cool. Yeah, Divide Music, who asked the monitor questions. Yeah, man, it's whatever works for you. And that's the thing. I think people just go and listen to music at the store and they're like, oh, I love that song. That sounds the way I think it should sound. And then they get it home and they mix through it and their mixes don't sound any better, or they sound worse. Or you gotta figure out what your deficiencies are or what your tendencies are and find a speaker that helps solve that problem for you. You don't want it to, you don't want the speaker to solve the problem. You want the speaker to inform your decisions and your moves to help solve that problem. So yes, probably no CB10s coming out anytime soon. Well, you know what? It's actually interesting. I would love to design a monitor, and it would probably be very NS10-like, but it would be fixing a lot of the problems that the NS10s had while keeping the stuff that's actually really, really useful. So that would actually be very interesting. I've never actually thought about that. So, but like I said, the Neumanns work well for me. A couple of the other speakers that I like, I used to mix on KRK E8s. I really liked those. Those kind of informed my decision making to facilitate a good mix. We had PMCs at the Atrium. They were also really great. I've got the big Neumanns over at Chad's studio, the 420s. We used to use Genelec 1032s. So there's a perfect example. The Genelec 1032s are really fun to listen on. I love tracking on them, but I can't mix. I don't get very good mixes on them. Yeah, you got to find what works. But I know other guys like to do great work on the Genelecs. So it's just whatever works for you. Okay. John, what mic do y'all use? Like the telephone voice, retro carbon mic-ish sound. I like a Bullet, a Shure Bullet. Or even just a 57 with a Sans amp on it. I can do it too. Or any mic in a Sans amp. So, yeah, I typically like recording if you're doing that telephone or like the kind of the distorted kind of lo-fi sound. I personally like getting that clean on a decent mic and then putting that effect on after the fact. If you need to do any tuning, if you need to align other vocals to it, if you need to punch it in later and for whatever reason you don't have that same setting on the thing, or you don't have the same, let's say you're in a different studio and you don't have that one thing. I just find that there's not a lot of downside because there's so many cool like plugins now that can get you that thing. But there's not a lot of downside to doing it clean and then affecting it, but doing it the other way around, there are a lot of downsides if you run into certain scenarios. So, okay. So I mentioned I was going to come back. Kyle Coffey, who's one of my coaching clients, sent in some questions as well. And in all of the questions he wrote, go deep. Well, we're 2 hours and 10 minutes in, so I'm not going to probably go too deep, but I do want to hit a couple of these. And then Kyle, if you're watching, we will talk on one of our calls. We'll kind of go in. We'll go in a little deeper on these. So he asked about electric guitars. We talked a little bit about mics. He asked any surprise guitars, amps that I like to use, tube BQs, preamps. To be honest with you, I'm not super picky when it comes to preamps. As long as they're good, as long as they're clean, or as long as there's nothing wrong with it. If I'm using a preamp that's a little too mid-rangey, well, then I'll probably just carve out some mid-range. If I'm using a preamp that's a little dark, I'll probably just boost a little top end. Like I'm just going to do whatever I need to do in order to get it the way I want. So there's no real surprise amps. I think I've been pretty vocal about like my favorite amps, what I use a lot, what I like. Obviously the Diesel VH4. A kind of a lesser known amp that I love, the Naylor SuperDrive 60. I've got the new Rev generator, the the anniversary edition. Love that thing. I love I like rectifiers. I love the Mesa Mark series stuff. Like I've got a Mark IV. I love, obviously the Mark IIs and stuff like that. I don't think I've actually ever used a Mark II in real life. I don't know. Maybe a kind of an interesting thing to add to that. Like, what's on my shopping list? What's on my wish list for amps? I've always wanted a Soldano SLO, and I'm hoping if I end up kind of getting back to a studio where I've got some room and I can fire up cabs. I think I'll probably finally get an SLO. What's something else that I've been looking at that I'd like? Maybe an underrated amp that people just kind of discard pretty quickly is the Marshall JVMs. They're a 4-channel modern Marshall. Like I think those sound really good as well. So okay, there's that. Kyle also asked about recording vocals, room gear, methods. That is a deep question. So I think we'll have to address that one at a later date. Favorite recording session ever and why? Interesting. This is actually interesting. A few of my favorite recording sessions have actually been orchestral sessions. And I can't remember which Avril Lavigne album it was, but I recorded, I don't know, it's probably like a 40-something piece orchestra. David Campbell was the arranger, who's just a genius and really nice guy. And like he'd done some of my favorite string arrangements. So he was doing it, and I was fortunate enough to record that session. And I think I'm just always just absolutely blown away by how those sessions literally they don't practice, they tune, they don't rehearse the part. It's ready, set, go. You're recording potentially the thing that ends up on the album, and you actually haven't heard anything before it happens yet. So as an engineer, you have to be on it. Everything's got to work from get-go. You have to almost guess at mic preamp settings and mic positioning. It's a little chaotic. But when that first note hits of an orchestral recording, it's just it's glorious. So I would, again, it's I've gotten to do some amazing sessions. For whatever reason, that's the one that kind of comes to mind is that was a really cool session in particular. So I don't know why that's maybe on the top of my mind. There's probably 10 others that I'm not thinking about right now. He asked me what my least favorite session is, and I'm going to keep that for a private conversation. If you sign up for my 3-day workshop, we'll be having dinner after each night, and when the cameras stop rolling, then you'll get the goods. Anyways, this is a good question, and then I think maybe this will be the last question for the night. And actually, I saw a couple more pop up in the chat. Okay, I'm going to finish on Kyle's last question, so I'm going to jump back to the chat here for a second. Any thoughts on ATCs? ATCs are great. I'd say the I think it's the 45s. When the last time I went and checked out monitors, I was very close to buying a pair of the 45s. So I do like the ATCs. Do I use a sub when mixing? Right now, I'm not using a sub. In my studio, I was, and again, this just comes back to I should just have a billboard behind me, like only if you need it. If you need it, use it. If you don't need it, don't use it. My monitoring system right now, the room that I'm in, the volume that I record at or I listen at, all of that stuff, I don't need a sub. In my studio, I did. It was a very well treated room. It was designed by a very reputable acoustician. It was built properly. I could very easily have mixed without a sub, and I had the sub on a switch, but to get the full frequency, and it was pretty flat, where I wanted it to be flat. The sub was necessary to get everything. When I turned the sub off, I could still mix, but there was the drop off was a lot higher than I wanted it to be. So, Jordan's back. Before I jet, what I love to do with Tom's boost top end a lot, but dip the stick attack. Yeah, totally. Yes, exactly. Get a lot of that top end and then just kind of like cut out the tick and squash the fuck out of them. So, Jordan, thanks for all the participation is awesome. I really appreciate it, man. And you've been great on a lot of the other videos as well, commenting when people have questions. So, dude, I appreciate that so much. Eric asked, what studio monitors do you use? Answered that before, but I'll say it again. It's the Neumann 310s. So, okay. What do I think about mixing on NS10s in modern music today? Eric, where were you like 30 minutes ago? I did talk about that. So when we jump off, you can kind of hit the rewind button and talk about. I talked about a little bit about kind of my experience with NS10s. I think with a sub, and if it addresses your weaknesses or your tendencies with mixing, it's still it's a tool. I used to refer to the NS10 as a treadmill. The NS10 is a treadmill of studio monitors. And people look at me like, a treadmill? What the fuck do you mean? A treadmill's not fun. Running on a treadmill is not fun, but it works. If you want to, get in shape, or you want to like build up your cardio, or if you just want to lose some weight or get some exercise or whatever, a treadmill is probably the least inspiring thing to go and do that on. But it's probably the thing that might work. It's probably in like the top 5 things that actually will fucking work. I'm not a fitness buff, so maybe I'm wrong. But I used to call it the treadmill. It's like, it's not fun, it's not inspiring, but it works. So, Surrender Stella asks, Chris, will you be doing more internships? I can't afford and also don't have a passport at the moment, but definitely interested. I'm hoping to. And actually, maybe I'll take that as an opportunity for the people who are tuning in later. I do have a couple spots left. I'm doing a 3-day in-studio workshop in Vancouver at the Armory. It's going to be awesome. A couple spots left, so go to my website, or I'll put the link in the chat here again. Sorry for the sales pitch, but that's what we do. No, it's going to be really fun. Like I said earlier, if you guys weren't on the beginning, this is probably the most like open door, candid thing I've ever done. Like, I try to be very open and honest and free with a lot of the information, in terms of just like, I'm not hiding stuff from anybody. I'm like, I tell you guys kind of what I think and what I like and what I don't and what I do and all that stuff. So, but being able to see it in person I think is going to be like next level. And I think it's going to be a really, not only a really enlightening experience, but I think it's going to be fun. And like I said, like, there's going to be some time that we can kind of like, shoot the shit a little bit. And I think some of the conversations that happen in a recording session that aren't necessarily just about what we're doing are some of the almost like the best experiences that I've had of just, it's like, having lunch and kind of like hanging out and maybe talking shop about something specific that wouldn't have ever come up otherwise. So that's my sales pitch. I'm hoping to do more, but this is like I said, this is the only one that's currently on the schedule. For those of you who don't know, I do have kind of a limited availability, but I do one-on-one coaching calls, as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, a little bit more affordable, it's not such a big investment, not such a big commitment. You can kind of just do one whenever you're available and whenever you want, pick the topic and that kind of thing. So if that's something you're interested in as well, go to my website. I have limited availability for that, but I try to make myself as available as possible for the people who do like that and want that kind of thing. So, okay, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. Everybody, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's participation. All the questions that I got ahead. I got some more on Instagram that I will post answers to. So keep an eye out if I didn't get to your question. And like I said, I'm going to try to start doing these a little bit more frequently. I think what I'm going to do is maybe on my website, I'll have like a question box, a question comments box. And that way I'll just, every month I'll have a list of everything that anybody wants answered. And we'll figure out a way to kind of make this as efficient as possible. So, like I said earlier, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, please go to my website, do so. That's going to kind of keep you up to date on all the good stuff. Going to be some exclusive content there that's that only the subscribers are going to see and they're going to get. It also gets you a link to the Discord server and gets you first dibs on the workshop or any other events that I have coming up. And yeah, love that you guys are into this, and I love doing it. So thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up with Kyle Coffey's last question for me. What is CB's favorite soda pop? And I love this question because anybody who knows me and's been in the studio with me or has been to In and Out with me knows that CB's favorite soda pop is, drum roll, root beer. There you have it. Okay, till next time, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We will see you soon.